Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture. My name is Ben Warner and I'm joined once again by my good friend and colleague Steve Kern. How are we today, Steve? How's lockdown treating you, or supposed lockdown anyway?
Well, hello everyone. Yes, I've got under less restrictions than you are, Ben, but they're still very tight and we still have to be mindful of social distance and other good practices. But I have to say, it's working out well for me at the moment.
Well, I was able to go for a walk before, because that's one of the allowed permissible activities. But it's interesting.
No more than two people.
Yeah, that's right. But it's interesting because there's a lot more people walking out there now than what there used to be. I think it had something to do with the deputy police chief down here saying that he was going to review the fines to see if they actually made pass the common sense test, and then that's probably just enough to get people out and about.
Well, I saw something myself this week on that. I went for a run in a very popular part of the parklands, and there was no more than two people in one of about 200 groups running around that park. So I don't know if that works. Two people and they don't know the other, 398 people. Is that okay? Anyway.
We'll add it to the confusion on the messaging on what is and isn't permissible. So just wanted to start quickly with briefly with a story from New Zealand that there's two guys over there trying to sue Jacinda Ardern over the lockdown, claiming they're being illegally detained. I'm actually just following on from what we were talking about last week in terms of sort of rebellious actions and whatever. It's just, I'm surprised this sort of thing, we haven't actually heard this even sooner than what that people would be trying this.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I put my conspiracy hat on, just for a bit of fun, to write some notes for some ideas of things. And then you start to think about, okay, what if COVID didn't really exist? And by the way, everyone, it does. So I'm not suggesting it doesn't. But, then you think about, actually the fact that we're not allowed to gather in groups of more than two, and you've got to be moving, you can't be standing still, closer than 1.5. That's actually really draconian, kind of dystopian, sort of crazy sci-fi stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised probably that there hasn't been a bigger backlash to this, but I'm thankful it's probably because everyone understands this is a really serious situation. Yeah. But gee, don't stop and think about it like I did, because you can come up with some really crazy sci-fi scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. One other interesting thing too with just while we were on New Zealand was this talk. I believe ministers in both governments are talking with each other about the potential of just having a trans-Tasman bubble open once things settle down. We'll be able to travel between each other's countries, if not anywhere else.
Oh, I love it. Really, that's probably what should have happened years ago between Australia and New Zealand, and it's a really interesting sort of proposition, I think, because this maybe is one of those changes that then lasts forever out of this, and it wouldn't have happened otherwise. And just for anyone who's listening around the world or hasn't thought about this very much, the distance between Adelaide, South Australia, and Perth is roughly the same as Adelaide, South Australia, and Auckland, New Zealand.
Oh,
so why shouldn't we all be one country?
Can you imagine that? They just become another, I don't know, larger version of Tasmania or something.
Wow, I don't think that's fair to our Kiwi cousins.
No, it's not.
but it'd be nice to have, an additional couple of islands within the Australian connection. I don't know what we call ourselves.
We'll figure out a way to annex them. Let's put it that way. All right, so the main topic today, we haven't talked about Trump for a while. It was about Jew. I think just between you and me, I think I was just waiting for him to, sort of fire up in this current situation, and he had. Boy, was he firing up this week. I guess it wasn't going to take long before he, put the gloves on and started, firing up, to deliver the best reality TV ratings that he could. CNN, as they want to do, compiled a list of all the crazy statements he gave. I should double check it, but I believe it was just in one press conference. But he's had a couple so far where he's really cut loose. And what I wanted to focus on, though, in there was what got everyone so fired up was when he was saying things like the President of the United States has the authority to do what the President has the authority to do, which is very powerful. You know, the President calls the shots. But the one that was really interesting was when somebody's the President of the United States, the authority is total, and that's the way it's got to be. And that got everyone, really fired up. As it says here, the comment on that in this article was, this statement should terrify every single person in the country. Although, coming from him, like with everything, you can take it with a grain of salt because he wound it back the next day in the next press conference. So... and on top of that, he's tweeting out that, his, the press briefing ratings are, the best that he's ever had, and he's trouncing whatever else is in that same time slot. And it's funny, but it's, I guess, not funny given what the scenario is, the real, sort of serious impacts of what the scenario is doing to their country in particular.
Oh, look, I agree with that. And I think, the one thing in COVID is that Trump's met his match. He really doesn't know what he's doing, and you can't bully a virus like you can a competitor or someone you're trying to do a business deal with. And I think, if you look at what he tried to do with words around the start of this was actually bully the virus out of America. And it's like, that doesn't quite work. You're not going to stop a virus with words. But, and that normally works for him. But I do wonder, I think obviously his attitude and initial response is left America vulnerable. But I think since that initial phase, I think the states have largely looked after themselves, kind of in a not dissimilar way to maybe Australia, where there's federal direction. You need the federal direction on top, and then you need the states to make their own decisions beneath that. And so maybe the thing is that now actually he's quite ineffectual. What he says is stupid, but I think if people can realise that and get over that, then they're best just to leave him to say what they want and let the states get on and with the business of looking after their respective territories.
Well, that's actually right on that particular point is probably a good example of where to discuss something we were just talking about before we got on, about the fact that we've always been looking for what was it going to take to break through the partisanship and sort of break that fever. And it seems like not even a global pandemic, where with their country being the worst hit, was even going to do that. And there's been a lot of crazy stuff that's been happening where even though you've got those governors that can call the shots and shut down states or do whatever reaction that they're doing, you actually have that partisanship playing out between the governors as well. So you've got ones that are doing like the lockdown stuff, like Cuomo in New York, Newsom in California, but then there was other governors that were completely ignoring it. And I don't even know if all of them have actually shut down yet anyway, because they think, the cases are low, so we don't have to do anything. And then there was that crazy story out of, I think it was Michigan this week, with the lockdown orders were put in place by the governor, and then there was a whole bunch of people that protested that about being against their civil liberties and whatever, and that caused even further problems because the gridlock they caused prevented hospital staff from being able to get to hospitals, and that the whole thing just highlights how crazy they are, just in terms of their real inability to deal with it.
Yeah, look, I think it's a real missed opportunity by Trump. He had an opportunity to really, supersede his past in the eyes of the American people and maybe even the world, and show that actually he could be a leader in a time of crisis. But he's failed miserably. All he's done is divided the states. And while, I think with the Americans, traditionally they've had individualism, and that's led to enterprise and opportunity in that country. At times of crisis like this is when you need unity, and it's the role of the president to provide that unity. He hasn't done it. He's missed an opportunity, and I think he's devalued now everything that he's sort of won over the last 4 years.
And I think it's just highlighted the fact that they just will go to screaming at each other, both ends of the spectrum. The thing that disturbed me is that I find a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of missed opportunities and bad handling and all that. You can point that out, but that sort of inability to reconcile both sides of the argument, even in this particular situation. And I actually feel for Fauci in a way, because he's almost got an impossible task of trying to, deliver the information that's needed without looking like he's criticizing Trump in the middle of those press briefings, for instance.
Well, I still haven't worked out whose side he's on, just to be honest.
But do you think he actually wants to be on a side? That's the whole point. I kind of look at him and I think, does he... like he almost looks like he's got the face, like a look of resignation on his face when he says, I want to be here to, deliver information and that. And he actually did say that, he has to sit there in those press briefings just silently on the side. And he said in other interviews that he would rather be off doing something else more productive.
Well, yeah, that's the way I'd like to see him, as a hero who stepped into a pretty difficult role given the president's commentary.
Yeah.
And that's good if that's actually his motivation, because somebody's got to make some sense of it. And I think he's managed to turn Trump around to some extent.
Yeah, and that's why at least he's being listened to in that regard. The other thing I wanted to touch on was there was a New York Times article which actually interviewed a lot of Trump supporters and his sort of handling of everything. And it's interesting that they're just to this point is that they're still firming up their belief that he's doing a great job and handling all of this. The thing that there was one quote that they got in here where someone said, the way I see it, you can't call a guy a racist for stopping travel to China a month ago and do a 360 flip a month later and say he didn't stop travel soon enough, which, by the way, I think is a 180 flip, but I won't I won't go any further than that. But I think that's where on that China travel ban, that was what he needed to do. And so you've got something like that, which to me is not taking into account, the totality of the response. But then on the other side, you hear, Trump being called a racist by the opposing side, which isn't helpful because that was what needed to be done. Yeah,
but this is where now I think Trump makes trouble for himself. It's just the fact that he flips so often. So it's not helpful, I think, that there are people on the other side that are almost politicizing his inability to deal with this situation, because his inability to deal with the situation is not political. It's dealing with an orange man from a very strange section of society. He probably has no empathy and no interest in the other 7 billion people in the world, outside of the Trump clan. And let's be honest, that's probably the case. Calling him names now doesn't help. And, this would have been equally, I think, if someone was clever enough to work out how to do it, a way to a bipartisan, even though Trump probably maybe would have knocked him back. But they should have aligned with Trump in some way and tricked him into the right decision. Or opposed him into the right decision would have been better.
Yeah, exactly. And just finally, I guess Trump's been famous for his entire life for, even though he may appear to be combative to the press and the media, he also courts them privately on the side because he knows the importance of it. And it appears it appears that even in this situation, he's still doing that sort of thing too. Because I did see another article where the journalist was saying, look, he's kind of still pulling us in, and he'll call us fake news and terrible people on camera, but then still have us there. And there's an argument about whether or not the media is playing that game for his benefit a little too much as well.
Well, I think, yes, I have wondered about that myself. You sort of see the press conferences when he takes a stick to one of the journos, and it always seems to be that the journo's there perfectly framed, sitting in exactly the right spot, not behind someone else's head or anything like that when it takes place. And, you know, I don't know. You know, there's a win in that for the journalist because it's clickbait.
Yeah. But also for him too, because he gets his shots off.
Oh, he certainly does, and he gets them repeated over and over again on social media.
Yeah,
you know, and that's really where news is delivered now. You know, it's whatever people find interesting or amusing. So unfortunately, I think that's the new normal.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yes.
All right, we'll wrap it up there, and we'll probably revisit because, as it turns out, the US has turned out to be the center of it now in a way because of just the sheer scope of how bad it's been over there. But we can also just keep an eye on how the rest of this is going because we're going to be in this for quite a while.
Well, yeah, I think I've sent you an article before, Ben. Maybe we'd have a chat about it next week or something. But I think while I expect restrictions to ease at some point in the not too distant future, things are going to be different for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so don't forget our website, scitechculture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our Vimeo, YouTube channels, our RSS feeds, and watch us on any or all of your devices, and we greatly appreciate your visit to our website. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.